Hello, and welcome. Welcome to Flexible Pathways for Students, Unveiling the Data Will Transform the System. I'm Dan Blickensderfer, and I'm your IMS host for this session. I'll be monitoring the chat for questions and comments. With that, I'll turn it over to the speakers.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff Grant. I'm our Credential Solutions Lead at the nonprofit organization Credential Engine. Our mission is to map the credentialing landscape with clear and consistent information, fueling the creation of resources that empower people to find pathways best for them.
And I'm Sarah Cunningham. I'm the Director of Operations and Engagement for the American Council on Education's Learning Evaluation Service. ACE is a membership organization that represents all sectors of U.S. higher education. And our learning evaluations program translates diverse learning experiences like military learning, workplace training, apprenticeships into recommendations to help schools grant credit for prior learning.
Hi, I'm Nick White. I'm the Chief Learning Officer of Alternative Learning at Strategic Education. Today, I'll be talking about Sophia, which is a competency-based course platform. So it's self-paced and subscription-based. We have more than 40 courses and more than 40 partner universities that have published articulations with us, and hundreds of other institutions accept Sophia courses through ACE's credit recommendation program. So far, our students have completed more than 1 million credits at Sophia, and I'll be starting us off. So as you saw in the session description, what we're talking about here is pathways, and it's really a very basic problem. The pathways work really well for the traditional student that goes from high school to one college and then to a career. That group of students is smaller percentage each year and will continue to shrink. For the rest of students, and this includes me, I aggregated credits from 6 institutions for my undergrad. For that kind of student, the system is incredibly opaque and it fails too many students. As National Student Clearinghouse published in 2017, students lost an estimated 43% of their credits, or 13 credits, which is a full semester. And so that's a pretty big bump in the road for those students. But the good news, the reason we're here, is that solutions exist for that. And it's not that we don't have awareness of these issues. It's not that there aren't good pathways that have been built, especially within states. And it's not that we don't have the technology. We do. And so that's what we'll be discussing today. And so Jeff will start walking us through that.
Great. Thanks, Nick. I think the main thing we wanted to do was highlight 2 new tools that we've been working on at Credential Engine related to credential transparency description language. One's the transfer value profile, which is a way to support articulation agreements. And the other one is pathways, which connects a variety of components together to reach a destination. So those are the 2 main tools, if you will, that we'll be highlighting. And this is a natural extension of Credential Engine's work through task groups that are just now beginning to put into practice. So on the next slide, I'll just mention some work we've been doing regionally, because pathways aren't just an institutional problem. The Midwest Credential Transparency Alliance, it's a group of folks in the Midwest that are all focused on advancing a variety of solutions, but in particular pathways. They sponsored some research around pathways and found within a short period of time, almost 700 different pathways being articulated. These are from state agencies, industry organizations, employers, a variety of folks. And as you might expect, those pathways consist mostly of credentials, but there are other pieces of data that are relevant to progressing as well, including courses, jobs, transfer value, competencies. And the more challenging piece of this that we want to highlight is that all of that pathway information is being communicated through composed PDF documents or web pages. It's not being communicated as data that could be used in apps or other tools. So on the next slide, we just tried to get our heads around that and imagine, well, one, reflect on where we're at today and think about where we would like to be in the future through this maturity model. And it seems like today, pathways are actually quite hard to create and manage. They're hard to find, they're difficult to understand, and they're largely disconnected from one another. And in the future, pathways should be a natural part of any credentialing workflow that are linked with market data and logically connected to other pathways, even if that pathway is in another state. And most importantly here, this last item is about being responsive to individual users' needs. Right now, most pathways are fairly generic and don't anticipate the circumstances or the needs of individual users. Sarah?
Yeah, and we want to talk a little bit about the urgency of this problem because there are real inequities in our current system. It fails a lot of people. So we have good evidence that underserved populations and those who are also more likely to be from low income backgrounds are earning a small percentage of bachelor's degrees in the US. And someone's chances of earning a degree if they are both the first in their family to attend college and from a low income background is dramatically lower than if they belong to neither of those groups. And that's because our current system places significant barriers in their way and fails to recognize those accomplishments that might come from different kinds of pathways than the traditional. And this has just been exacerbated by the pandemic. So while we know that enrollments dropped across the board, the impact was uneven and it hit some of those same students the hardest. So we see that really dramatic decrease in enrollment at community colleges, which are often serving folks who are most in need of these pathways and different on-ramps to a college experience. So the good news is that we have a very powerful tool that we can use to try and do better for these learners. Credit for prior learning, which is recognizing the skills and experience that an adult learner brings to their education. It increases the likelihood that those students earn a credential by 17% overall compared to adult learners that don't receive it. And this is based on research from Kale and Witchy that came out last year. And the effect is even stronger for exactly those people who need better from this system. When you look at the effect on community college students, students at minority serving institutions, and Pell Grant recipients, they benefit immensely when colleges are able to honor their lived experience and use that recognition to give them a head start towards their degree goals. Unfortunately, it's not as widespread as we may hope it would be, given how helpful it can be. And ACE recently convened a national task force on the transfer and award of credit. This was actually spurred by congressional interest in improving that efficiency when students have to change colleges or change their plans. And there are 3 recommendations that came out of that work that are particularly salient to the work that many of us are doing in this space. The first was to really prioritize the award of transfer credit and credit for prior learning and its application to degree requirements, which means in effect that you really need to have a pathway for how that credit that someone is bringing into a school is going to help them get a head start towards their degree goals, and to embed this priority throughout the culture of your institution so that everyone understands its importance. The third recommendation was to leverage innovative technologies, which is what most of us here are here to do, to facilitate the award of credit and provide greater consistency across credit award determinations in order to help students navigate this space. And then the fourth was to improve transparency, which is right up the alley of the tools that we have available now that we want to talk to you about a little bit today, making clear upfront to students what credits will be awarded and how they will be applied to a student's degree pathway. Because what we know is that even when schools are doing a good job of granting credit for prior learning, there is an additional step of making sure that that is clearly communicated outside of the institution. That is where we often fall short, and students can have a really hard time navigating the system and figuring out where they should be putting their time and energy in order to achieve their goals.
Fantastic. So what we've tried to do is highlight here how pathways and transfer value are needed at an institutional level, at a regional level, and at a national level. And to really build that level of ecosystem, the broad ecosystem, we have to have some basic agreements about terminology, about data practices and policy that support individual users. And so we're going to shift here to start thinking about a user in this case. And this metaphor of a transit map is kind of helpful because everyone's, back when we used to have these IMS conferences together in person, I'd always be using my phone, my Google Maps, to find out how do I get around to the conference location or other bars and whatnot. So, a transit map will lay out for you all the major landmarks that you want to know about, the routes to get there, and the different transit stops that you can take advantage of, and then layer in additional data for more value. At Credential Engine, we pursued a definition to a pathway that's very similar. In defining a pathway as a resource composed of a structured set of components, defining points along a route to fulfillment of a goal or objective. So this is a broad definition of a pathway. It's very flexible to the unique needs of a learner. And we'd like to highlight that through some user stories here now.
Yeah, so we can think about this kind of map from the perspective of two different kinds of learners who are trying to navigate the current system. So say learner number one has an industry certification that she earned through her job, and she's interested in learning where she can use it for advanced standing into a degree program. Currently, she might have to send her transcript to a school for evaluation first, often at a cost. She might even have to enroll in a PLA course and a full semester before she finds out whether or not she's actually going to get credit for her credential. And she has to drive this whole journey herself through applications and self-advocacy and documentation. If we go to learner number two, on the other hand, this learner might have a goal in mind already and be trying to make decisions about which certifications he might earn as a first step. So where should he be investing his time and money and energy to pursue a credential? He faces the same challenge. He doesn't know which credentials carry value and currency to help him achieve this eventual goal, which might be a degree program that he knows will help him get a sustainable job for him and his family. So he's not sure what step to take either. So in the future, what we want is a system that surfaces the value that credentials have towards certain goals as, again, a map, so that all the learner has to do is find where they fit and match up those opportunities with where they're trying to get. We can use transfer value profiles, which describe how a credential might be brought into another experience, and pathways that string those together to do that. So if you think about learner number one, she knows the pathways that are available to her based on what she's already earned, where she started, and it will tell her where she can go. And then if you think about learner number two, he knows which path, which starting point to pick based on the goal that he's trying to reach. So we want to tell you a little bit more about the tools that we're talking about here and some use cases.
So back to Sophia, and this scenario is really learner two. So most of Sophia's courses are for that student that knows they do want to complete a degree. We have some courses like Introduction to Web Development that are for people that are exploring that occupation, and some other courses for employer partners that may have AC credit recommendations. But most of the courses are designed very much to meet the expectations of curriculum and assessment for higher ed courses. And we work with ACE to do that. In this case, because we publish our courses and the articulations with universities to our website, and ACE publishes their credit recommendations to their national registry, but partner universities' practices vary. Some have it visible, some don't. most of the institutions that accept ACE credit recommendations don't have that all laid out publicly. So in this case, what we're doing now is we published all of our courses to the Credential Registry. And then the cool thing is then ACE can go in and say, yes, these courses did receive those credit recommendations. And now the best thing is that universities can go into the Credential Registry and indicate whether the courses are accepted for elective credit or a specific number of semester or quarter credits, and if it's for specific courses. And so now we've completed the triangle of our offering the quality assurance through ACE and then the receiving institution. All of that is machine readable data that any application can pick up and use however they want to help students navigate their choices.
Yeah, and just to lay out a little more on that data point Nick just made, I wanted to just bring up the CTDL itself. This is a transfer value profile. And as Nick said, in this case, ACE as an organization made the claim that the transfer value from, which is a term in CTDL, for that Sophia course, Ancient Greek Philosophers, has a value of 3 semester credits at the lower division level in the subjects of philosophy and humanities. And so that is a self-contained description of the output from ACE's evaluation of the Sophia course there. On the next slide, we go a little broader in thinking through how several of those point-to-point agreements and transactions could be knitted together into a broader pathway with many different branches. This is an example of a nursing pathway in the state of Indiana. Like most states, Indiana has many different government agencies, educational organizations, and employers that are all engaged in different segments of becoming a nurse, of a nursing pathway. And I've assembled here just 10 resources, screenshots of marketing materials, spreadsheets, web pages, legislation, and other kinds of PDF documents that are all currently being used to communicate information to the public about how to become a nurse in Indiana, ranging from which courses you select in your secondary school and high school, on what kind of transfer value those courses might have for an associate's degree, and how those associate's degrees could build into a bachelor's for a license to become a RN. So a lot of information. On the next slide, I just wanted to highlight that that information has now also been published to the Credential Registry as a pathway. We worked with the Indiana Commission for Higher Education and several of the educational institutions in Indiana to analyze the connections amongst those 10 documents and build out a logical way of connecting the information together for the user as one graph. And here, this one is mostly comprised of credentials and course components and conditions between the two, between earning various credentials and courses. So really, I guess the main point here is that we have the capability with these tools to make pathway and transfer value data available to the public. And the hope with this presentation with the IMS community is to encourage product service companies and others to prioritize investing in better support for these use cases. I know IMS has stood up a case pathway task force. It's very encouraging to begin exploring these connections. We support that. We participated in that meeting, and just encourage folks on this call that want to get connected to reach out and join in. Nick, I think you had some final thoughts too.
Yeah, just to recap, there are great pathways out there, as Jeff has described, that solve real needs for learner 1 and learner 2. We have a solution to make those visible and public those pathways in a standard data model. And we've seen that these pathways generate really substantial benefits especially for individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds. So we're here to promote this new model and all the benefits it can provide. Action is focused on institutions, but it applies beyond to any kind of organization really in the IMS community. And the message is simple: optimize what you already have. That's through internal audits and considering whether you can streamline things. Share what you have out publicly, so increase that transparency, especially through machine readable formats, specifically the Credential Registry provided by Credential Engine, and then help promote it in the community. And don't underestimate the value of requiring this in requests for proposal. That's the kind of thing that really drives the product roadmap for many software companies, is specific concrete requests. And so, wield that influence you have. Like I said, the good news is this is all available. And once we reach a tipping point, everyone will need to play by these new rules and make everything visible and public so that students can get all the benefits of increased transparency and better ability to make the decisions that are right for them. And so that concludes. If we have any questions, Dan, and we can move to that.
Don't have anything queued up in the questions.
Okay. Any final comments, Sarah, Jeff?
Yeah, I think I'd say that this is the reason that we're very excited about this. Is this presents an honest to goodness win-win kind of opportunity where doing the right thing for learners by improving these pathways and this system will also benefit colleges. So another sort of piece of data from that research was that students who are granted credit for prior learning also take more classes from the colleges that they attend than they would have if they weren't granted that credit, because they persist at higher rates and they graduate at higher rates. So I think there's often a risk of seeing credit for prior learning as a bit competitive with the offerings that the college is trying to make. It actually does not work out that way. It's better for the college because those students are doing better. And so they're also taking more courses when they're in school. So it's really a great opportunity for folks to be looking to take advantage of.
Yeah, I think maybe just to add on that the MCTA's focus on pathways, we plan to continue that over the next 2 quarters. One, publishing more pathways as examples, and also digging more into the interstate connections across pathways. So I didn't really mention it in the research, but very few of the pathways we have found have any relation or connection to other pathways. And I don't think that's intentional. It's often just I think a function of who is creating them and what are the funding streams through which that work gets supported. So the more a region can collaborate on common career pathways for its population, the better able that region will be to compete for talent and employers. So we're looking at the cybersecurity industry and an emerging area around autonomous vehicles, but battery technology and electricity as well related to that. Some very high demand growth in those areas, manufacturing as well in the Midwest. And then relative to equity, an intention to dig deeper into incarcerated populations who have unique pathway needs. Not all career pathways are open to formerly incarcerated folks, and the information available to them about their relevant options is limited. So that's another component of the work that can be accelerated through these RFPs. So we're intending to organize people interested in procuring services in that area as well. So lots going on related to pathways.
I do have 2 questions if
Great.
I can if I could share, the first one is, are there any current published pathways at the Credential Registry?
Yeah, we have 3 now. So we're, like I said, we're just starting. If you go on credentialfinder.org, you'll see those. They're, it's just a start, but it's illustrative of what's possible, I guess.
That's great. And the second question was, can students take both alternative credit courses and university courses at the same time?
Yes, absolutely. Nick, do you maybe want to talk a little bit about sort of the students that you guys work with and how Sophia functions for them?
Yeah, that is the case currently. Certainly some students do it and then transition into a university, but others do it while attending university at the same time, especially in the first years. They're looking at their options to accelerate their degree and reduce the cost. And that can really provide a ton of benefit, you know, when you're, and especially an adult learner looking at completing a degree that might be 4 years if you were full-time, but significantly longer if you're part-time because you're working. It can be really valuable to take a competency-based approach and be in control of how you schedule your time and how quickly you can complete those courses. So yes, both are great options.
Yeah, I think we've talked mostly about sort of on-ramps into college, but it's also true that 4 uninterrupted years to achieve a bachelor's degree is not the norm anymore for a lot of students. And so the ability to stop and start flexibly also becomes really important. And that means being able to do multiple things at once and have a system that accommodates that.
All right, well, if that's all of the questions, Dan, then I'd like to thank you, Sarah and Jeff, for joining me, and thank you, Dan, for moderating our session.
Of course. Thanks everyone for coming.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.